What you've mentioned before, talking to our reporter Arnold Frazier about cases that you have personally done, and how you've worked on them, and then you've seen them pled down. What's been your reaction to cases that you've been worked on being pled down?
Well, part of the issue is, like I said, when we're coming up for trial, the different assistants and I have to come up with, okay, whose trial is going to go. And, to some extent, our drug task force prosecutor, our other felony prosecutor, myself, our cases are kind of our babies. We all view it as the most serious thing under the sun. And then we have to sit down and say, okay, we don't know which one's technically the most serious per the county attorney, because he doesn't necessarily discuss that with us. So we have to sit down and make concessions. Okay, who's taking this trial date? When I win out, that's awesome. I get to have a trial, and my case goes forward. If it seems like there's another case that needs to go forward, then I have to come up with a plea offer. It's just simply the lack of resources for multiple trials in 1 month here in this county. So at that point, I have to look at the case facts, see if I can continue it or if I have to make a plea offer, and sometimes it gets pled down. I will say Gary has made offers on some of my cases that I was not happy with. They're still pending, so I don't want to make any specific discussion of those. It's unethical, but I'm not happy with it. Some of the offers I've made have been tough calls, and they turned out in ways that I wasn't happy with, even though they were my call. But bottom line, I think that if there was more structure with how trials were set up, if there was more guidance about which trial was going to be a priority to make sure every trial date was used, then we wouldn't have to sell the farm on some cases like has been done. To explain that, I guess, to somebody who's not as familiar with the trial court system, I'd just say, if we got 12 shots at it per year, and we know exactly how we're going to use those 12 shots, you know exactly how to organize yourself. If you don't know if each of those are going to be a possibility, it makes it harder to know what to do with the rest of the cases.
Ruben Neff is our guest. He is the Republican candidate for the Wapello County Attorney. He'll be opposing Gary Oldenburger. Now, Oldenburger has said flat out that you haven't been here long, therefore you don't have the experience to be Wapello County Attorney. What's your response to that?
He never received any training to be county attorney himself, and frankly, all the other assistant county attorneys, they didn't want to take on the responsibility, and that's how he ended up throwing his hat in the ring. He didn't go through a election where he had opposition. He kind of fell into the position. He had never seen, from my perspective, and he's certainly not shown it, how to organize an office. We constantly bring concerns to his attention, and we don't see them attended to. Frankly, he tends to walk away from us when we bring concerns about how the office is functioning, about maybe an assistant not pulling their weight, maybe a concern about how something was filed. He doesn't supervise the office. That's just the simple fact. And I'm used to being supervised. I've supervised other folks. I've supervised investigators. I've trained other attorneys in my prior jobs. So maybe I didn't run, say, the public defender's office in Tampa, which has over 100 attorneys, but I did hold a position of authority and supervising rights in a division which frankly was larger than the entire Wapello County Attorney's Office. I have that experience, maybe not under the title of county attorney, but I have supervised others. I do have more trial experience than Gary does. I do have more motion experience than Gary does. I've argued more motion hearings than he has. I've had more jury trials. I've had more non-jury trials. He may claim he's concerned about my background, but frankly, I fought in criminal law down in Florida. I'll do that here. I've done it for just as long as he has in terms of a legal career.
What is it about the trial experience that you have that Gary Oldenburger doesn't have? Can you be a bit more specific on that?
It's a natural reaction to be afraid of trial when you're an attorney at first. When you're just starting out, it's a scary thing to go up to 12 jurors and try to convince them. It's a scary thing to get into a fight with another attorney on the record. And I don't mean a fight, but it's a different experience. We're not all ready to be Johnny Cochran, so to speak. when I started out, I did have some fears about talking in front of people. And the office I started out at, they required that you go to trials at least 6 times a year, or you may be fired. That certainly gives you a lot of, we'll say, motivation to get out there and get over your fears. I remember one attorney flat out, one of my supervisory attorneys, just looking at me saying, well, I suppose I can't say everything they told me, but with a couple of expletives, they said, get out there, stand up, and you fight that judge, because they didn't like the way the judge was ruling. We don't have anything like that. I know Gary's when he was not county attorney and he had a county attorney, I know for a fact everyone says that she essentially let him do whatever he wanted. Unless you're really pushed to go into these trials knowing that you're showing up for a knife fight, you're just going to show up. And that's what he's been doing. That's why the trial experience matters so much, that I have more jury trial experience. So when there is a murder in Wapello County citizens know that that will be fought and prosecuted to the fullest during trial, and not just have someone show up.
We've talked with Gary Oldenburger before about going to trial and the all or nothing aspect of it, because if you plead down, then obviously the offender still gets punished. However, not as severe as some people would like. But if you go to trial, then there is a chance, if the defense does just convince one juror that he's correct, then the offender could walk free. Where do you strike the balance between going to trial and pleading down?
Well, first, when it comes to one juror, if one juror disagrees, you get what's called a mistrial. You get to try it again. So the only real fear is that the 12 jurors will say that person's not guilty. That is a concern. And a prosecutor needs to be confident enough in themselves and their case to know when to go to trial and go for gold, or when to plead down if there's an issue with the case. That comes with experience, and that comes with having the character to know you trust yourself. If you don't trust yourself, you're going to plead cases down that should have gone to trial. There is an all or nothing aspect to trials, but if you don't have that trust in yourself, and I don't see that in Gary Oldenburger, the likelihood of giving away the farm is much higher. Grooms, for instance, that's a case that was on video. That's a case that, frankly, the evidence was there for a conviction at trial. Now, I understand Gary said there were some other concerns. Now, I'll let the public decide how they feel about that, but that was his gut call. I have a different gut, I have a different background, I have different experience. That's, I think, what Wapello County has to decide, who they trust making those decisions. And it doesn't seem like a lot of people trust Gary on that anymore.
Ruben Neff is our guest. He is the Republican candidate for the Wapello County Attorney. He'll be opposing Gary Oldenburger, who will be the Democratic candidate. You talked about structure and guidelines. What type of structure or guidelines would you have in place if you were voted in as Wapello County Attorney?
Every plea agreement on every case, I would want to make sure I knew how it was reached, why it was reached, and why it was offered to the defense counsel. The county attorney is essentially the top prosecutor and supervisor of all the lesser prosecutors, the assistants. They all prosecute under the top prosecutor's name. In other words, when I take a case to trial, it's technically under Gary's authority. I will review every single plea agreement to make sure I'm okay with it before it goes out the door. Right now, that is not done. I will review every single case to make sure they are handled correctly. Right now, to my understanding, Gary has at most maybe 5 pending cases. That gives a lot of time to review what other people are doing. That gives a lot of time to have meetings with your other attorneys. Now, most people don't work in the legal field. Most people at their job, they meet with their boss. They have goals, performance expectations. Right now, none of that's out there. We don't know what's expected of us. We're not giving any goals as far as how many trials, how many convictions to obtain. That needs to change. Those goals need to be clear so that attorneys can follow them. Their files need to be reviewed so that if they're making mistakes, it's caught. Right now, that's not the case.